In the early 1880s, a woman would immigrate to the United States in hopes of becoming wealthy. What would follow would result in her being the most prolific female serial killer in the United States. Bernhild Paulsdatter Sturseth was born in Norway in 1859, and by the time she was 22, she had immigrated to the US under the name Belle Gunness in hopes of becoming wealthy. But the way she attempted to achieve that wealth was more different than the typical American dream and a lot bloodier. In 1884, she would go on to marry a man named Mads Albert Sorensen, which honestly sounds more like a used car dealer than anyone else, but they would end up opening a store together. And not long after, that store, as well as their home, would coincidentally burn down. And they would go on to collect the insurance money on both properties. Nothing out of the ordinary there. However, not long after, Mads would end up passing away due to heart failure. And in a stroke of good timing, it happened to be on the one day that his two life insurance policies overlapped. But in all seriousness, she murdered the hell out of him. And it probably wasn't even the first time she did it, considering the fact that it was said that they had two children that were both poisoned by Belle during their infancy for the life insurance money. So, kind of sensing a tone here. Belle would later go on to marry Peter Gunness, and that's when the cycle would resume.
Run, bitch, run! He gonna kill you!
She started off by murdering his infant daughter, followed by shortly after himself. It was also said that her adopted daughter's body was also found on her property. I guess after this, she got tired of the monotony of the marry, murder, and money plan and decided to streamline the whole thing. And she would then go on to meet wealthy men through lovelorn columns. Now, her process through that would be that she would ask them to go to her farm with money, and shocker to everyone, they would never be seen again. Now, I know this is a really sick person committing very terrible murders, all for money. But also, how stupid are these guys? I mean, I'm assuming that they have some level of intelligence because they were able to make money and apparently enough to be seeked out by a gold-digging, murdering bitch. And they still went. Like, a lot of red flags had to have popped off, but they still went.
Run, bitch! Run!
One of the men murdered was a man by the name of Andrew Hegling, and in 1908, when his brother began to suspect something was up with Belle, her farm would end up burning to the ground, mysteriously again. After the fire, workmen would find 4 bodies among the burning wreckage. 3 of them would be identified as Belle's foster children, and the other one was believed to be Belle herself. Now, I say believed because there was no way of them figuring it out because it was missing a skull. Not long after, the workers would also end up finding shallow graves all around the farm. And when all was said and done, there were a total of 40 men and children exhumed from shallow graves around the property. Belle's hired hand, Ray Lampier, would end up being arrested on May 22nd of 1908 and be charged with arson and the murders. But he would only be found guilty of the arsons since they weren't able to completely pin the murders on him. Ray would ultimately die in prison, but before his death, he would reveal the truth about Belle, including her plan to burn down the farm and plant the dead body there to ultimately fake her death, while she would go on to withdraw almost all money from her accounts and skip town. And to this day, she has never been tracked down, and her death has never been verified. So, moral of the story, if you're going to meet someone for the first time, Probably best to do it in a public place. Otherwise, you might end up in a shallow grave on someone's farm.